Travel back in time 150 million years, and the scene would have been much the same. These giant reptiles have existed almost unchanged since the Earth was dominated by the dinosaurs. When early explorers saw their first huge crocodiles and alligators, they thought they were dragons. They can't breathe fire, but they can kill a man. Few people get eaten by them, but hundreds of thousands of these reptiles have been slaughtered for their skins. If a concerted effort to save them isn't made now, all we will have left to tell future generations is the incredible tale of two dragons. Crocodiles, alligators, caiman, and gharials all belong to the same group, the crocodilians. They range in size from 3-foot dwarves to 20-foot giants. The true crocodiles have an enlarged fourth tooth in the lower jaw, which distinguishes them from the rest of the group. People have always hunted these reptiles for their flesh, their hides, or simply because of their menacing presence. But it's only in the last 50 years that their numbers have been decimated. If these techniques were still used to catch them, their future would not be threatened. But modern hunting methods using power boats, high-velocity rifles, and even dynamite have devastated their populations worldwide. Apart from humans, adult crocodilians have few enemies. They are supreme predators, which have evolved primarily for life in the water. The jaws of this Indian marsh crocodile give it a formidable grip. The limbs, although relatively small, can provide surprisingly rapid bursts of movement on land. The webbed feet and flattened muscular tail propel it with terrifying speed through the water. A tough armored skin is an adaptation that's played an important part in the crocodile's survival, but may soon prove to be its downfall. Only the belly scales are used in the leather trade. Crocodiles also have a transparent nictitating membrane over each eye, allowing them to hunt underwater. There are 1 million wildebeest in the Serengeti. Every year, in the dry season, the great herds descend on the Grumeti River in Tanzania's Serengeti National Park to quench their thirst. The resident baboons and warthogs know that real-life dragons lurk in this river and stand as far away from the water's edge as possible. But most of the wildebeest have probably never drunk here before. The 6-month-old calves have never seen a crocodile, so they are unaware of the danger. Drinking is always a dangerous time. The prey is geared to flee, and the crocs miss many more than they catch. The wildebeest come to these pools only for a week or two. Once they have moved on, the crocodiles may not eat another substantial meal for a year, until their prey returns again. Crocodiles generally target the calves. They are less suspicious and wade in deeper. This annual feast maintains the largest and most deadly population of crocodiles in Africa. They share their meat, showing a degree of cooperation which is unique among reptiles. Even with all the commotion, the wildebeest return to the water. They just don't recognize the reptiles as predators. Once the crocs have clamped their jaws shut, there is no escape. But very occasionally, miracles do happen. Crocodiles are powerful predators, but they also play a major role as scavengers. This hippo probably died of old age. The carcass attracts large numbers. Crocodiles have an acute sense of smell. Their position as scavengers is as important as that of lions, hyenas, and vultures. Not only do they dispose of any carcass in the water, but they will search them out on land, often at great distances from the water's edge. The crocodiles around this hippo are almost all the same size. They tend to live in groups of similar-sized individuals, as they have cannibalistic tendencies. A crocodile's mouth is designed like a steel trap. It has sharp teeth for holding on to the prey once the jaws have snapped shut. It has no cutting or chewing teeth like other carnivores. They simply grab their kill and, using their weight and strength, roll over and over until a chunk tears off. Crocodiles spend most of the night in the water. Once the sun has set, the air temperature can drop quickly, but the water stays warm for hours and allows these cold-blooded reptiles to remain active well after dark. It's late November, and the dragon's nesting season. 5 months after mating, the females come ashore to dig a hole 1.5 feet deep. Suitable nesting sites are hard to find, and they can fight over the best areas. The position of the site must be open enough to receive the full benefit of the sun's warmth. It must be close to the water, but not run the risk of getting waterlogged. A crocodile embryo can drown within the egg. Once a nest site is selected, it will be used by the same female year after year. The eggs are large, some 4 inches long, and are enclosed in a hard, chalky shell. The number of eggs laid depends upon the size of the female. Clutch sizes from 18 to 80 have been recorded. Once the last egg is laid, the sand is carefully replaced. She paddles down the nest to ensure the eggs are tightly packed. Unlike the majority of reptiles, female crocodiles don't just leave their eggs to fate and the incubating warmth of the sun. She remains nearby for the next 3 months and even abstains from feeding. Maternal protection is vital. Crocodile eggs are a delicacy sought out by many animals. The greatest and most successful robber of crocodile nests is the Nile monitor. It grows to a length of 4.5 feet and often manages to slip past a sleeping crocodile. The crocodiles have to watch their nests round the clock if their young are to survive. In early March, strange croaking sounds fill the air. "12 weeks after they were laid, the baby crocodiles signal to their mother that they are ready to hatch by calling from within the eggs. Crocodilians are among the few reptiles with a voice. The hatchlings' calls are loud enough to be heard over 40 feet away. It's vital that their mother hears them. During incubation, the sand often bakes hard in the sun, making it impossible for the babies to dig their way to the surface alone. They also need their mother to protect them from predators. Several nests may hatch at the same time, but each female knows where she laid her own eggs by its location. When the babies emerge, the females undergo an amazing transformation from a dangerous dragon to a careful and gentle giant. The hatchlings beg to be picked up. With jaws that can crush a buffalo, the female tenderly lifts them up and flips them into her mouth. She must get them to the security of the water, and the safest place to put them is in a pouch on the floor of her awesome mouth. The female has to make several journeys to empty her nest. While she is away, the baby crocodiles are extremely vulnerable. The area is completely exposed, and a 10-inch crocodile is a tasty morsel. Storks, herons, snakes, and large lizards are all known to prey on the hatchlings. It's amazing that a crocodile can crush the bones of a wildebeest with its jaws one moment and pick up something so delicately the next. The secret lies in the receptors at the base of each tooth, which enable her to judge just how much pressure to use. An adult crocodile is even able to pick up unhatched eggs and crack the shell to release the youngster inside. An amazing achievement when you consider the ratio of the adult's weight to that of the egg is 4,000 to 1. Before this astonishing behavior was first observed, it was thought that the female crocodile simply escorted her young down to the water. Another theory suggested that the young were transported either on the female's back or even hanging onto the enlarged scales of her tail. When all the young crocodiles are safely launched, their parents do not abandon them, but remain with their offspring for 6 to 8 weeks. The young grow rapidly on a diet of fish, insects, and frogs. Only when they're about 5 years old, and perhaps 6 feet long, will they be able to tackle their first large prey. Once they're this size, they have few natural enemies. Sadly, they are still hunted by humans. Every year, hundreds of thousands are turned into shoes, handbags, or hideous tourist curios. Of the 21 species of crocodilian alive today, 15 are now considered to be endangered, and 2, including the Chinese alligator, are almost extinct in the wild. One of the rarest species of all is the gharial. The rivers of northern India and Nepal are the home of this unique animal. The Indian gharial is the most aquatic of the crocodiles and lives almost exclusively on fish. The growth on the end of the older male's snouts is used to amplify their courtship calls. Gharials are also among the largest of living reptiles, reaching 20 feet or more in length. Today, fewer than 100 adults remain. Most have disappeared since the early 1950s, victims of dams, hunters, and fishing nets. But here in the Chitwan National Park, they are working hard to save this remarkable creature from extinction. These scientists and their helpers are looking for one of the few areas still used by the gharial for nesting. The site is less than 25 feet from the river, but this is probably the furthest a gharial will ever venture from water. This nest contains over 30 eggs. The eggs are handled very carefully and packed in the same layers as they were found. It's important that reptile eggs aren't rolled during incubation, as this would damage the delicate membranes inside. The crates of eggs are taken by river to a similar site nearby, protected by a predator-proof cage. A hole, identical to the one dug by the gharial, is excavated by hand. The depth at which the eggs are buried is very important. Too deep, and the temperature will be too low for correct development. Too near to the sand surface, and the eggs will bake. The eggs and sand are again replaced in the same layers, and the area is smoothed over. The eggs will now continue their development in conditions as near natural as possible. For safety's sake, as hatching time approaches, the nests are excavated. The success of the project so far is shown by the cracking of the hard outer shell, an indication that the embryos have successfully developed and the eggs will hatch soon. The clutches are now taken to the park headquarters at Kasara Dunbar. few days later, and the young can be heard calling from within the crates. The cracked, hard outer shell has fallen off, leaving the young to break free from the leathery membranes inside. With a little help, the hatchlings soon wriggle free. A baby gharial is very large, almost 15 inches. Much of this length is its elongated snout. The youngsters are taken to pens, where they will be fed and maintained until they're about 3 feet long and large enough to fend for themselves in the wild. There are now over 1,500 young gharials in rearing stations in India and Nepal, 15 times the world population of adults a few years ago. The first releases into the wild have already taken place. 25 were released into India's river Mahanadi, and many more have since followed. In Chitawan, it's the local people, the Bote, once hunters of the gharial and raiders of their nests, who are being employed to maintain the rearing centers and catch fish for the young gharials. Their rate of growth varies, even within the same brood. It usually takes about 18 months to grow 3 feet long. It's essential for the young to be fed during this period on living rather than chopped fish. They must have developed their fish-catching skills by the time they're released into the river. The Gharial project is so far a great success, and the future for one of the world's most fascinating predators appears safe. In India and Nepal, efforts are now underway to conserve the marsh and estuarine crocodiles. But the future for many other crocodilians still looks bleak. Extinction is nothing new, but it used to be a very gradual, natural process extending over thousands of years. Since humans appeared, the pace and frequency has risen dramatically. Across the other side of the world in Florida, another crocodilian almost disappeared because of overhunting. These men are looking for one of the most feared predators in the world. The alligator's jaws and teeth are terrifying, but few people have been killed by this shy creature. They may look menacing, but they live mainly on a diet of fish. In the days when men wrote stories about dragons, they didn't know that alligators, like Nile crocodiles, are gentle and caring parents. But for most of the year, alligators are not gentle with each other. Smaller animals need to stay out of the way or get eaten. Alligators are found in the southeastern United States, from Dismal Swamp, Virginia, to the Arkansas River and down to the Rio Grande. These are in the Everglades, in southern Florida, one of the alligator's last strongholds. They feed on fish, including gar, another of the principal predators in the Everglades. They also eat crayfish, snails, insects, and anything else they can catch. By helping to limit the number of gar, the alligators do sport fishermen a favor. Gar eat the young of game fish, such as bass and sunfish, in large numbers. The alligators are valuable to the rest of the wildlife, too. They maintain deep pools in the otherwise shallow swamp, and in dry seasons, when the water level falls, these alligator holes may be vital to the survival of the aquatic life in the swamp. In the recent past, when alligator skin was in fashion and hunting was at its height, the numbers of alligators fell perilously low. Hunting is now more strictly controlled, though poaching is still a problem. The alligator is recovering, and aquatic birds like the limpkin and the innumerable herons who live here have a guaranteed water supply all year round in the re-established alligator holes. The birds are not completely safe, because an alligator is quite capable of catching one by the leg in shallow water. The limpkin eats its snails on the bank. The other birds have to keep a wary eye open. A spectacular event in the alligator's natural cycle is the bellowing of the males, which rises to a peak in May. Mating follows soon afterwards. This is a time when the otherwise ferocious beasts seem almost courtly in their behavior. The partners approach each other tenderly, nudging flanks with their snouts. The female selects a male, one with a good strong bellow, and he responds by courting her. At other times of the year, such close approaches are likely connected with feeding or aggression, or a grisly combination of the two. Alligators are avid cannibals. Many have scars or even missing limbs after encounters with hungry or angry neighbors. The alligator's eggs hatch in August, during the wet season. This is the time the females show the gentle side of their nature. The babies emerge at night, in a nest which is a carefully constructed mound of damp vegetation. It's made of reeds and rushes, and it insulates the eggs from sudden changes of temperature. By composting slightly, the nest keeps the eggs warm at night. All the eggs hatch within a few days of each other. The first babies to emerge do so unaided, using a protuberance on their snouts called the egg tooth. Eggs which hatch later may need assistance. The female alligator guards her nest constantly until hatching time. Then she actively helps her babies to escape, lifting them from the nest, or actually cracking the eggshells in her huge but gentle jaws. She releases the babies in the water, a little way from the nest. Others, which have already left the egg, might need a helping jaw on their way to freedom. For an animal so instinctively violent in its reactions, the female alligator is remarkably patient with her young. She guards the babies after they have hatched, keeping them together in the pool and driving off herons, raccoons, or snakes, which would eat them. The babies are brightly colored when they hatch, in bands of yellow and black. After a few days, they begin to feed, on insects at first, progressing later to snails and occasional small fish. The bright bands of a new baby will fade as it gets older, until at 2 years of age it has become the same dull greenish-black as the adults. Although young alligators are lively and very active creatures when necessary, they spend long periods just floating in the sunshine, a sitting target for predators. Their mother's vigilance is what keeps them alive. A much greater threat than predation comes from human interference with the water system of the Everglades. This enormous area of shallow, slowly moving water is extremely vulnerable to disturbance, and a huge variety of animal life depends upon it. The Everglades used to be 100 miles from north to south and 60 miles, supporting an endless list of creatures. As well as the alligators, there are water birds, raccoons, kites, and otters, all interlinked with each other, and all responding to changes in the water level, which is now under human control. The water which forms the Everglades floods south from Lake Okeechobee, more in summer than in winter. As the giant city of Miami grew, more and more water was drawn from the Everglades to support it. Additional canals were cut to control the summer floodwaters across land which was once swamp and is now farmland. When rainstorms cause the lake to overflow into the northern end of the old Everglades, flood control gates are opened to release the water into the southern part, now the Everglades National Park. The effect is to save the northern sugarcane plantations from flooding, but at the same time to cause a sudden rise in the water level in the park. To the nesting alligators, this is a disaster, but it's an unnatural disaster created by man. Their life is based on roughly predictable seasonal changes in water level, but to the alligators, man is totally unpredictable. The seasonal changes in water level in the Everglades are part of the alligator's evolutionary background. Their life cycle is adapted to cope with them. However, when the wet summers of the early 80s made it necessary to open the flood prevention gates to the north, the alligator's breeding area in the southern part was suddenly flooded, almost a foot above the normal level. The result was a disaster. Alligators live in water, but they are air-breathing reptiles, and their eggs need air too in order to survive. If the nests are flooded, thousands of developing alligators die in the egg. This nest is the normal size of about 30 eggs, but they are all dead, except for one, which seems to have hatched early. The baby alligators have died just days before hatching. All have perished for the sake of keeping the water off the agricultural land to the north, land which was until recently the alligators' province. There's a strong argument on both sides. Ever since Florida became a favorite retirement retreat for people from all over the United States, the value of agricultural and residential land has increased. As much as possible is taken from the swamp every year. This is reclamation which endangers the alligator. The scientists set out to gather evidence to establish the effect of these violent man-made fluctuations in water level. If the floodgates could have been held closed for just a few more days, all these babies would have lived. It's argued that better cooperation between the alligators' supporters and the flood control people could have prevented the disaster. But owners of valuable plantations and their insurance companies carry a lot more weight than reptile conservationists. The loss in 1980 was catastrophic. Elsewhere, an adult alligator, dead from natural causes, is being reabsorbed into the food chain by a turkey vulture. A considerable body of scientific research has been built up around the Florida alligators, organized by the Everglades National Park. To find out more, the scientists had to subject themselves to some hair-raising situations. Alligators are most active at night, so they must be caught in the dark. Catching the adults was essential if the park scientists were to gather the information they needed. Unlike a lot of scientific research, alligator catching is a dramatic and exciting event. Once the noose is in position, the alligator can be hauled into the airboat. The noose is often supported inside a rigid pipe to give some protection to the handler. Larger specimens are more safely handled from the bank. The boatmen pass the line ashore to avoid the danger of a capsize in a flurry of teeth and tails. The operation is dangerous. An adult alligator will snap in self-defense and is capable of causing severe damage. Its powerful jaws must be closed and then kept shut.
I've got about 4 calls to make, so Well, let's see who's off here.
Here's the light box on this guy. See right next to the door?
Oh, yeah.
The scientists wanted to know the ages of the present population, how they were recovering from years of heavy hunting, and to study the movements of the alligators to see how they react to changes in water level.
Hey, buoys are all right. Just a second.
As with most reptiles, which grow throughout their lives, an alligator's age can be estimated very accurately from its length. Blood samples are taken to investigate the genetics of this population for comparison with others elsewhere.
Here's the light box on this guy.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, it is.
I've got about 4 calls to make, so we've got all right.
One way to study the movements of the adults is to fix tags to their feet. If they are caught again, they will be recognized as coming from this place.
These flashed on the giant screen at our work.
Yeah, you can count on it.
Brightly colored plastic collars help to identify the animals even from the air during surveys of the whole swamp. Field research is designed to provide answers to various questions. Knowing how the weight of the adults varies during the year can provide important clues about their food supplies.
Make that pressure gauge point up where we see it if possible.
The young alligators are easier to catch and to handle. There's a mystery about them which has puzzled biologists for years. Although the small striped babies are relatively common, it's hard to find young alligators between 2 and 4 years of age. While the babies are under their mother's protection, they're safe. But once they go off on their own, they must avoid the company of older alligators if they are to survive. This youngster's mother will be somewhere close by. The youngsters are checked for tags. This one has none, so it's a newcomer to the project. A label will make it easier to follow. The future of all the Florida alligators could lie in understanding the movements of a few youngsters like this. The scientists have adapted a tiny radio beacon to fit the baby alligators, in the hope of being able to follow them in the vast, trackless area of the Everglades. The aim of the work is to stabilize the alligator's fluctuating fortunes in its main stronghold in southern Florida. Some of the large adults also carried radio collars to keep a check on their individual movements. When it's wet, they don't travel very far, but in dry weather, they might have to move a long way in search of water. If the water level rises too high, all the fish-eating predators in the swamp suffer. Their prey disperses over the whole of the Everglades and become hard to find. Stability and safety lie in careful control of the water system. The people of South Florida use the alligator as a symbol and as a source of income. Nowadays, it's the animal itself and not its skin which attracts the crowds and money. As long as tourists keep paying to come to the Everglades to look at alligators, the local people will see that preserving the alligator is worthwhile. Not so long ago, alligators were endangered by intensive hunting to provide skins for the fashionable marketplaces of the world. Legal protection and a change in public taste has enabled the population to recover. In 1988, alligator hunting began again in Florida, with a strictly limited number of hunters licensed to take up to 15 animals each. More important, as a result of the scientists' work, the system of sluice gates was put under the control of a computer to mimic the effects of natural rainfall. The alligators are recovering. They are one of nature's survivors, but many of their relatives are in dire trouble. If we don't make an effort now to save all crocodilians, these incredibly powerful yet deceptively gentle dragons will exist only as creatures of myths and legends.